Hello there, I'm Kaz. There honestly isn't that much that I can say in this introduction that has been repeated by a million other people a plethora of times. Greek mythology has and continues to be an inspiration for many mediums, ranging from classic literature to modern art. Of course, some mediums take more inspiration than others, usually paying tribute to what surviving pieces of artwork of ancient Greece remain, be they pillars or pottery.
Most of the meanings where said imagination has taken place are many centuries old, unlike the realm of video games which are, at best, several decades old. So it is an absolute pleasure to see the art of Greek pottery brought to life in Apotheon for PlayStation 4 and the PC. This game has been in development since the middle of 2011, almost 4 years ago, by a fellow Canadian studio called Alien Trap, originally slated for January 2015, then delayed for the first week of February. So, is Apotheon a title worth championing its praise from the top of Olympus? Or is Alien Trap delivered a modern Greek tragedy? Let's find out.
The gods have abandoned you. What love they once gave is now gone.
The story opens as the gods have abandoned humanity, and chaos has taken a hold of their land.
Even the midday sky gives only twilight.
Oh no, not Twilight. You know, when the sea can no longer sustain life, I think Twilight is not that bad of a thing. I mean, could have been worse. It could have been the host.
Hera, the wife of Zeus, releases to Nicandrios and sends him to Olympus to kill all the gods who dared not honor their covenant and get revenge on her husband because, well, it's Zeus. Basically, it's the God of War trilogy in one game, one man slaying an entire realm of powerful figures while gaining their powers. And as excellent as the art may be in depicting ancient Greek and its gods, the same cannot be said for the myth Apotheon attempts to tell. The dialogue is beyond repetitive, always drilling in the same point over and over again, how Zeus is horrible and must be stopped, how full of themselves the gods have become, or how lowly mortals aren't fit to stand in a realm full of them. Every single line is exposition for the player, explaining who is who and what they do, none of which helps develop any of these deities as characters, let alone our main hero, who's a blank slate through and through, with no arc, no development or change as he mindlessly slays the Olympians who abandon his people. This is one of the worst examples of a game that tries to tell you its tale rather than shows you a story. What's more, it's a story about the Greek gods, the deities whose adventures have lived on over millennia, the inspiration for so many stories and characters that we consider to be classic today. Yet the route that was chosen to take the story was a generic tale of deicide. What can be called the characters barely resemble the figures they're supposed to. They get the basic elements of each of them, like Zeus being a terrible husband, but they lack any of the character or personality associated with them, aside from maybe Athena. To say they're cartoonishly simple would be an understatement. The paper used to animate cartoons has more depth than them. There are some excerpts that reference major events in Greek mythology, but the game itself doesn't seem to understand what they're referencing. Just to give you an example, one of the earliest figures you deal with is Demeter, whose daughter, Persephone, has been taken by Hades, a reference to one of the most famous myths of all time. When you finally descend into the underworld, you receive the powers of renewal from Persephone, and she stays with Hades. That is not how the myth goes.
You want to know how the original myth went? Zeus and Hades decided to trap Persephone in the underworld, against her will I might add, and her mother responded by making the land infertile and threatened to wipe out humanity if she didn't get her daughter back. That myth could have been implemented a lot better than it was in here.
I can forgive inaccuracies in an attempt to tell an original story based on historical or fictional event, like I did with Valiant Heart and its minor mistakes in regard to historical inaccuracies, but Apotheon's attempt to portray the gods that it does is downright insulting to the source material. Some of them aren't even gods. During one of the missions on your quest to kill Poseidon, you're sent to kill Hipparchos. Hipparchos was a Greek mathematician, otherwise known as the father of trigonometry, not a god. Nicandrios himself, so far as my knowledge goes, isn't even referencing any specific Greek person. It's just a Greek name that means victory. This is not like the aforementioned Valiant Heart, which had a few minor inaccuracies but still managed to capture the tragedy of the First World War. This is just throwing in the names of whoever or whatever sounds important from ancient Greek texts. Ultimately, this lackluster narrative just results in raising some very simple questions, like what happened to the rest of the Olympians and Mythic Beasts, without any attempt to answer them. On top of that, there is a huge disconnect between the game and the overarching narrative the game is trying to tell. After being struck by Zeus's lightning and falling back to the mortal realm, our hero gets up like it was nothing. This consistently weak writing makes for one legendarily weak Greek story. But that's not the only Achilles heel to this titanic title. Let's start out with the strongest aspect of this 2D plot trucker. Apotheon's combat system is excellent. It's a mixture of long-range and short-range weaponry with a heavy focus on blocking and striking at the right time for the most amount of damage. Both armor and weaponry alike deteriorates over time, which is a good way to encourage exploring the different weaponry at your disposal. You can even throw your weapon if your opponent tries to run away and heal. It's a very tactful system with a lot of depth to explore. What's more, the weaponry is incredibly varied, with a good amount of swords, spears, stones, and arrows to wield, among other weapons, which are, for the most part, very faithful to the weaponry used in ancient Greece. There's also some light RPG elements, like buying equipment and upgrading your skills for faster and more powerful attacks, but the combat system is brilliant as is without these token elements. That said, there's a couple of design problems that inhibit the system's enjoyability, the biggest one being a lack of any sort of competitive online multiplayer. This was a golden opportunity for a Colosseum-like mode, where players could face off in a fight to the death with their favorite weapon of choice, possibly even having leaderboards for the best and most powerful of all. There is a local multiplayer mode, but it's pretty limited as to what you can do. Maybe you can get a friend together for a match or two on PS4, but on PC? Yeah, good luck with that. I'm not normally one to complain about a lack of multiplayer. Believe me, I am quite sick of games that cram in some terribly unnecessary multiplayer mode instead of focusing on a solid single-player campaign. But the combat system was made for two human players to face off in a battle of wits. Speaking of wits, let's talk about the other major issue, the AI. The AI is laughably bad, with enemies that run back and forth, not bothering to attack you while you bleed them dry. There's a roll button, but you'll often forget about using it since tapping the attack button and the occasional heal finishes the fight most of the time because they rarely put up any sort of formidable challenge, and healing items or items that can be used to craft healing items are plentiful in most areas. Even the bosses don't put up much of a fight, most of them being beaten by the same strategy as the grunt you face on your way to their lair. None of this is helped by some rather awkward physics that fling you or your opponent back with one hit. I repeat, flings you or your opponent back with one hit. It doesn't matter if it's a knife or club, if it hits, somebody is being flung across the screen like a rag doll. And again, this creates a huge disconnect between the gameplay and the overarching narrative. The gods have betrayed mankind. You alone are humanity's salvation. Venture forth, mere mortal, to see if you may by your hand slay those deities who abandon your people, or face the judgment that you were so mercifully spared by the almighty Zeus. Speaking of bosses, that's one of the major disappointments in Apotheon. The boss battles are all banal. They're unique, sure, but unique isn't the same thing as well designed. There's a battle on horseback against Hipparchos, which sounds incredible, if that's what you ended up doing. Half of the time you're firing arrows on foot, trying to close the distance between you before he runs off. The only boss fight which comes close to being good is the 100 vs 100 match against Artemis, which goes on way too long to be enjoyable. That's a good summarization of Apotheon. The entire experience is one long, tedious list of tasks that is simply a chore to complete. The main goal is to slay all the gods and gain their blessings, but before you can get to that, you have to finish several menial missions to earn a chance at killing one of them. Get this item, kill this beast or person, destroy this object, and so on and so forth. Credit where credit is due, there's at least some variety to these tasks, but there's so many of them that it just makes the entire experience a bloated bore. And it only took 8 hours to beat. After you defeat each god, you're granted their blessing, though some of them don't make much sense given the mythos of the Greek deities and the universe of the game. After slaughtering the Lord of the Seas, the mighty Poseidon, you're granted the ability to roll in the air, as in the opposite of the sea, because rolling waves? What? Others don't even seem to work properly. Hera's blessing is the ability to lockpick any door, yet these doors require a specific key to open them, even if you have lockpicks. The area design is confusing. Here I'm arriving on the eastmost island of the sea from the west. What? There are some areas which are fun. The Temple to Calm the Seas is a particular standout, and there are some signs of good design, like an exit right into the objective once it's complete, but the area design in general is a complete mess. As for the PC settings, the options menu is pretty decent for a 2D title, with separate key for bindings for menu, movement, and items, as well as separate audio sliders for, well, the audio. Event settings don't have much to choose from, just VSync and shadows, and there are no anti-aliasing options, but again, it's fine for a 2D title and it runs well on my PC. At first running it gave me some trouble in that it was troubling it wouldn't run, but after rebooting the PC, it started up just fine. Presentation wise, the art direction is fantastic. It looks like a piece of Greek pottery came to life. It's the most striking part of the game and definitely the one which deserves the largest amount of praise, because it is simply stunning. Less impressive is that nasty scanline you may have noticed throughout the entire review. And no, this wasn't just something that happened in a single area. Throughout the entire game, from beginning to end, this visual mishap made viewing the gorgeous art design a constant pain. Not to mention, there's a ton of other technical issues, like getting into areas you normally shouldn't be able to, and a myriad of bugs like... What in the...
I kid you not. When I first saw that, my jaw dropped. What do you say though? Just play the bit.
I can fly. I can fly. I can fly. Hey, I can fly. If I just spread my wings. I can fly. I can fly. I can fly.
In addition to these graphical glitches, the game crashed on me once when I tried to reach one of the islands in Poseidon's domain. I would like to remind you all that this game was in fact almost 4 years in the making. Technical issues aside, the aesthetic is impeccable. If only the animation was a little less simplistic. The characters aren't badly animated per se, but they aren't anywhere near as impressive as the rest of the presentation, especially with the common sight of enemies just turning into ragdolls and gushing bloods out of the most minor injuries. The sound design is great, featuring some surprisingly strong voice acting. Unfortunately, my capture card is not picking up any of the sound from the game, so I can't show it. The music is very well composed, eloquently capturing the epic scope of this god-slaying conquest. At least, it would be if the game measured up to the Olympians it claims to take after.
It is really disappointing to know that Apotheon ended up in its current state. The things it manages to do wrong completely undo what good the rest of the title has accomplished. Yes, it looks gorgeous. Yes, it sounds great. And I will admit, it had the potential to be an excellent game with its interesting combat system. But as is, Apotheon is a tedious slog with too many bugs and boring areas to make it anything more than a potential Steam sale purchase, earning a 4 out of 10. That's all for now, folks. Until next time, I don't know, just tell me when Aztez comes out.